I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, a geopolitical and financial analyst, a deep thinking, big picture guy with information that you really need to know. I've had him on. He's becoming a regular on the site. He's got a new paper out talking all about this information about the internet and how, forget the NSA, the internet is acting as its own spy agency with programs like Hadoop and things like that track everything you do. He also has a paper out talking about the possibility of war and how it could affect you and your pocketbook finances. What I'm talking about is Warren Pollock. Warren Pollock, thank you for coming to us from New York.
It's great to be here, Greg.
We'll talk a little bit about this new paper that you have at the end of the interview, and there's so much to it that I've got notes and notes and notes. It's 140 pages long, but I want to focus in on the war aspect that you go into detail here, which I think you're going to be writing a lot about in the future. But I want to start with the peg of the missile test off the coast of California. Now, a lot of people are very worried about that, and you say, "Whoa, you know why they did it. You suspect why they did it. Why did they fire these missiles off the coast of California? What's happening?"
Well, they're firing them in the direction of China. But what's so amazing about this is, the ocean is a vast place. They could have chose anywhere to launch these missiles from, and instead they launched them right next to a metropolitan area. So really, they're sending a message to the people in the United States, more so than they're sending a message to the people in China. It's definitely not directed at Russia. But what the government wants you to see is that the U.S. is this big, powerful military strength type of country. It's in control of the world. The reserve currency is worth something because we're a strong military power. And really, on a conventional sense, the emperor has no clothing. And this use of a last resort weapon, the demonstration of it, is a sign of impotence. It's a sign of impotence. If you remember the Iraq War, the second Iraq War, there was a turn of events where the U.S. got stalled, and they had sort of this thunder run, which ran into Baghdad, and it was against all conventional wisdom to do this. And that turned the war around. I mean, the U.S. would have eventually won a war of attrition, but they had sort of this attrition phase in Iraq. Eventually we left, similar to Vietnam. We're sort of in the strategic hamlets in Baghdad. Eventually we left. We just gave up. But the U.S. military as a land force is not equipped to fight China. And as a naval force, for the most part, it's obsolete. So what the masters of the universe have done, the generals in the military-industrial complex have done, is they've said, look, this is what we have. We are a great and vast power with nuclear submarines. We have ballistic missiles. And they're saying that not only to the people of China, they're saying that as a propaganda piece to the United States, the domestic people. Similar, we talked about Jade Helms several months ago, and I said on a macro basis it didn't mean very much. But that's also a demonstration of force to the domestic people of the country. It's not a show of meaningful, credible military force or protection. We can't even secure our border with Mexico. And that's how anemic the U.S. military is. It's a boondoggle. All the money that you put into the military has gone off to these welfare companies, like your Lockheed Martins, your General Dynamics. And even if you look at the aid to Israel, let's say $3 billion is going to Israel. All that money is cycling back to these defense contractors, and they're building all these boondoggles. The F-35. They're going to be useless.
That's a disaster. Everything I've read about the F-35 is a disaster.
It's a disaster, and what you have now is the world is getting ready for war. The smart people are getting ready for war. You have Japan, for the first time since World War II, building an aircraft. It's a commercial aircraft. It's a Mitsubishi aircraft. What other aircraft did Mitsubishi make in World War II, Greg? Do you remember? Starts with a number?
It's a zero.
The zero.
It was it was cheap. It was fast, very maneuverable, more maneuverable than our planes, and they had a lot of them.
Exactly. And the same thing, there's a company called Textron in the United States, and they're building a cheap fighter. The Israelis tried to build a cheap fighter called the Lavi, and the U.S. government shut them down. And the reason they shut them down is because Israel could have been a major exporter of jet aircraft, a very lucrative job for the United States. So when you think about this $3 billion aid, it's really a payoff to stop Israel from competing with the U.S. And what happens is they chased Israel out of jet aircraft, and they chased them into drone technology and missile technology.
And Israelis have highly effective drone technology.
Right, and we're paying for that. We're paying for that because we have all these ineffective weapons, but in the back of the mind of some of the military planners, we need effective, cheap weapons. So Israel is the R&D lab for that. A lot of the $3 billion aid is going for that, into that technological powerhouse. And also, talk about people hoarding bullets, like all of these agencies have hoarding bullets. Well, if you think about the Vietnam War and you think about the Gulf War, these munitions, stored munitions, have a tremendous life. And we've seen surplus munitions from one war be used to fight the next war. So when they're getting all these bullets for all these police departments and what have you, that's adding to the depletable stock of munitions, which could be used in a later war. So the military budget isn't a small percentage of the GDP. It's not even what it's stated. It's at least $1 trillion a year when you think about it. And what I'm doing is, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
What I'm doing is thinking about things in a parallax view, a different viewpoint, because you hear, I'm saying, okay, why are they doing this? Is this a possibility? Is this a contingency? And these are posits. They're not necessarily facts. I'm not presenting you with a fact. I'm saying, what if this is how things are really arranged? And that's what analysis is, and that's what an intelligence service does.
And I want to talk about China. Go back to China. You said something to me in the pre-interview, and you said, war starts when the Chinese economy implodes, and it ain't looking good in China. I mean, they got banks with $4 trillion in a black hole. I read on one article a $44.4 trillion black hole in their banks, and they're cutting their yuan value, and they're trying to compete with the United States. What's going on between the U.S. and China? The U.S. is talking about raising interest rates again. And
right,
Yellen last week has said, well, we need to study our policy tools, these unconventional tools. But you don't know what? Are you going to raise what? Have you seen the Baltic Dry Index? I mean, what?
Or have you seen the oil tankers that are parked out of Galveston, all stacked up in a row, or in the Middle East, all stacked up in a row? I mean, the economy in China is coming to a halt. It's in deflation. It's in a depression. And all the capital which has been poured into China, much of it, has been misallocated. It's similar to the 1920s in the United States. The onset of the boom time and then the follow-on depression. And what's going to happen is, I think, I have this theory that all this U.S. money has been misallocated abroad in Brazil and Russia, India, China, and that's going to try to be repatriated. Well, people in China want to get out of China. They want their assets out of China. They're using Bitcoin, whatever means they can, to get out of this non-convertible currency. And they see that this is going to be a full-blown deflation where debt is going to go bad. People's commitments are not going to be honored. And what they might try to do is delay sort of the buy for time. So they'll try to do the old formula first. They're going to try to lower the value of the yuan.
They've been doing that.
They're going to try to see if the U.S. can become a export partner again. They called up their friends in Washington and said, we're going to lower the yuan, or else our economy is going to be destroyed. They're going to try to invest in more ghost cities and more ghost railways and more ghost dams that don't work. So that's the knee-jerk reaction.
But why would the U.S. be raising rates in the face of that? Are you saying that China has something to do with that they're telling Washington, you need to strengthen your dollar to make our yuan look even better?
Absolutely. And
explain that.
Well, if the U.S. dollar gets stronger, the goods from China get cheaper. And that allows us to buy more Chinese goods. But there's no way for that money to come back to the U.S. There's a longstanding prediction, which I really explain in my new document. I took some of the criticism and said, okay, I really need to spell things out. So that's how an 80-page document turned into a 140-page document. So it's spelled out line by line. You'll understand exactly what's going on. I talk about the return of some of these U.S. dollars, like in pension plans.
You called them cockroaches.
I call them cockroaches. You can see Norway is in a deficit, Saudi Arabia is in a deficit, and they have to cash in U.S. dollar assets to cover all these obligations. Saudi Arabia is doing that. China has to do that. But first, what China's going to try to do is they call up their friends in Washington, strengthen that dollar, get your people to buy Chinese stuff quickly.
So this is why they're contemplating, even though it's crazyville, even though everything is imploding, they're saying, listen, U.S., you better strengthen that dollar or let our yuan drop or something. Right,
and what's going to happen is these sort of a return of the cockroaches, where people that own U.S. dollar assets that are unfunded, the commitments that can never be made good, that just makes the pile of bad U.S. dollar assets higher and bigger, and will make the crash bigger and bigger. So this is sort of a short-term prediction. The short-term prediction is China's going to buy time, strengthen the dollar, lower the yuan, do all these ridiculous stimulus programs. And the longer-term prediction is what we're going to find that that there's going to be a shortage of U.S. dollars. And we're going to have, like, say, Norway trying to cash out of U.S. stocks, Norway trying to cash out of bonds, Saudi Arabia trying to cash out of U.S. stocks, Saudi Arabia trying to cash out of U.S. bonds. People having pension annuities.
And when everybody starts cashing out, the implosion in the U.S. happens.
Exactly. And people can't get paid. This all these terms like de-risking, that's where, like, UPS sold its pension to an insurance company. And guess what? With this de-risking, the pension is no longer good because it's only good as the insurance company. And in the old days, you used to have Mutual of Omaha. Remember Mutual of Omaha? The insurance company that did the TV shows? All these insurance companies were mutual companies. So if you owned a policy, you were an owner of the insurance company. Now, all of the reserves of these insurance companies have been boiled off, and they're all publicly traded. So these companies don't have great reserves, but they have great commitments to people's pensions, to people's annuity, lifetime annuity. Give them $250,000, they'll write you a check, $20,000, $30,000 a year for life. That's no good. You're going to find out you're 65 years old and have no money.
So all these pensions are going to be no good. At the same time, the dollar assets are going to be sold off. You'll have a big implosion. The U.S. is going to go into a depression like we've never seen ever in the history of the world.
Right. But what's going to happen, I think, first...
I want you to expand on this. The U.S. is going to go into a depression unlike we've ever seen. It's going to make the Great Depression look small.
Unlike we've ever seen, but it's possible that war is going to be the resetting mechanism. So let's say you're in China, all right? Let's look at it from their perspective. Let's say that you're in China and your economy has gone bad. Well, guess what? The Japanese are evil. The Americans are evil. They're rubbing shoulders with us in the South China Sea. They're stopping us from having our manifest destiny in the sea. They're helping Taiwan become independent. They're meddling with our oil supplies in the Middle East. And all of a sudden, there's a tremendous anger against the Japanese in China. What if that was to translate to anger in the U.S.? I mean, Japan sees this war coming. Japan sees this war coming. They're changing their constitution. They're building aircraft for the first time. They see this war coming. Russia sees this war coming. They're starting to build small, cheap, disposable ships. To some extent, the people in the U.S., there's maybe one or two generals that know what's going on. They see it coming. They're stockpiling bullets. The people that have their heads in their asses in the Pentagon, they're advocating for more aircraft carriers, more of these big amphibious landing craft. The amphibious landing craft of the day of World War II were tiny. So we're going to have a catastrophic naval loss eventually to cheap missiles. Everything's going to be cheap and small and disposable, and the U.S. is stuck with this big behemoth of technology, and they won't even be able to find the batteries to run any of it.
So you're saying that these bullets that everybody's been talking about, they're going to martial law in the U.S. and all of this. You're saying the powers have bigger fish to fry. They're stockpiling bullets for an external war, not an internal war.
Exactly. And if you look at the evil in the United States, the real barbell of tyranny, and that's covered in the presentation, it's all on the local side. the red light cameras, the police, all that's on the local side. That's not on the federal side. The federal side is screwed up. It has no view. Its only overview right now is looting. That's its only overview. Steal as much as you can. Even trying to extend NAFTA. Now we have, the TPP. Throw away more jobs, and let's have a real basket case economy. Send everybody to school. Have everyone buy a house. Be a consumer. Go to Nike.
And you're saying that the real war starts when China's economy finally folds. I mean,
Exactly.
Economy and war are intertwined.
Exactly. You're not going to get the Chinese to become consumers. That's not been happening anytime soon. And if you make them consumers and everyone buys a car, you won't be able to, you'd have to drive your car so the bumper hits the road because there won't be any room on your roads. So they're not going to be a great consuming economy. What they're going to do is try to sell everything cheap on eBay, and that's only going to work so far. And then what they're going to do is say, oh, we can do what the U.S. does. We can build a military-industrial complex. We can funnel all our money into arms and munitions and keep all our people employed and happy and, have an evil enemy, the totalitarianistic American state that is quashing our future, horizons. And Japan, who occupied us and tortured our people and raped our women. And all that's going to sort of hatch out. Or Russia, gee, we need more land for agriculture. We need more oil locally. And it's hard to, look at World War II. Look where, France was and England was. That was like a narrow distance. The English Channel is like, 20-something miles? The distance between China and Taiwan, and China, it's great. It's a tremendous distance. There's going to be no invasion over the water. It's all land. This war is going to be land-based. It has to be.
And you're saying that, and you just brought up Russia and China needing land from Russia. Last time you were on, they said they were leasing land in Russia. That lease may turn into, we're just going to take it. But the allies are the war is going to shape up with them, and I'm just going to talk about the main players: U.S., Japan, India, Russia, Iran on one side. Again, U.S., Japan, India, Russia, Iran on one side, China, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, and Indonesia, big population countries, on the other side. That's a bizarre matchup. I mean, the U.S. and Russia, that looks like we're getting ready to go at each other in the Middle East. Yeah, well, you're saying not so much in the big picture.
And not so much. And, in the report, it's 150 pages. Can't say everything here. It's on ScribeD or at wepollock.com. I can't say everything here. But we have, I talk about how the Saudi economy works. And that nobody in the U.S. talks about how the Saudi economy works.
And it's a big deal to us because they could get taken over, and if they do, the dollar could tumble.
They're going to have a coup internally within Saudi Arabia. It's already in action.
You're predicting a coup in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, it's already happened.
Why hasn't the dollar been taking a big hit?
Well, what are you going to do? Is buy Saudi Arabian currency? Or maybe the euro might get stronger.
So you're saying the coup has already happened in Saudi Arabia?
What's that?
You're saying the coup has already happened?
Well, it's in movement. It's in process. It's sort of like a Byzantine royal family that controls all the business. It controls who gets jobs, who doesn't get jobs, who gets welfare, who doesn't get welfare. You talk about the Bin Laden family, and I have actual contacts in Saudi Arabia. The kids go to school in Cambridge, Massachusetts for free on scholarships. And what the Saudi government has done is paid off people through the Saudi royal family. It's paid off half the country. It's impoverished the other half. It's enslaved Muslim Islamic people from all over the world as slave labor servants and workers. And this royal family is like it's a head with many it's a body with many heads. It's a chimera. And they're going to fight it out. The oil price is low. They can't pay for all the welfare. They can't pay off the Bin Laden family. They can't pay off all of the middle-class people that are working for Saudi national banks. All these state-owned enterprises. Saudi Arabia is sort of like the U.S. We have this sort of oligarchy. Well, in Saudi Arabia, they have state-owned enterprises. Those are the employers. Those are the people that are providing jobs for people in those seats in all of these banks. Saudi Development Bank.
When do you think this? When do you think this coup will fully be finished, and what will it mean to the U.S. dollar?
Well, I don't think it will affect the U.S. dollar because there's a glut of oil. I think what Saudi Arabia is going to do is return to the cockroaches. Is going to try to cash in U.S. dollar assets, obviously. But a lot of these places have non-convertible currencies for a reason. China is a quasi-convertible currency. Saudi Arabia's currency is quasi-convertible. So it's hard. Once you're stuck with Chinese money or Saudi money, it's hard to get out of it. It's illegal to get out of it.
Would you say that once everybody starts cashing in these dollar assets, John Williams has talked about this, about hyperinflation, all these, he says there's more than 16 trillion, at least 16 trillion liquid U.S. dollar assets held outside the U.S. And when people start liquidating that, all this stuff floods home. The Fed is going to have
That's not. I would disagree with John. I mean,
he says they're going to liquidate it, and the Fed's going to have to print money.
No, we talked about that where the Federal Reserve adds money into the system, but they can't multiply it. We talked about that in a previous presentation. That's how money really works. You could print money, but it doesn't go anywhere. It has to be multiplied through productive economic activity of some kind. You have to buy a machine tool, and then
you have to loan it out. Money is loaned into existence.
But money is also debt. So when you have, if you go to your bank, you look at their financial statements, your deposit is their liability, their loans are their assets. So when their assets go bad, the home loans, your money goes away, and that's deflation. Where there is inflation and there's hyperinflation, and I'd like you to ask John about this. Why is there non-core in the U.S. hyperinflation? Why in the U.S. is there non-core hyperinflation? For example, I could buy a bucket of electronic parts from China where there's deflationary depression for pennies. But if I buy a steak, it's $30. The price of, I looked at a price of Big Mac index. A McDouble with cheese was $1 about a year ago. In New York City, in some places, it's $1.99.
100%.
100% inflation. That's non-core inflation. When the Federal Reserve looks at inflation, they're only looking at core inflation, all the things you don't need to live.
But you're saying, I just want to kind of get the clearer picture of this. When you're saying the dollar cockroaches come in, that people start cashing these assets, just everything will just implode. It won't hyperinflate. It'll just poof.
Yeah, you're going to let's not think about debt, which is more complex. Let's think about stocks. Let's say that Saudi Arabia and Norway sell all U.S. stocks at the same time. What happens to the price of the stocks? The price of the stocks go down.
They crash.
What happens to people's 401k accounts?
Crash.
They go down. Is that hyperinflationary? And then look at the Fed response, quantitative easing. Has it inflated the stock price a little bit? Yeah, but has
a little bit. Doubled it.
Yeah, but has it started the economy up?
No.
There you go.
So in this scenario, and I want to get into this because the worst scenario is not immediate, but it's coming, is what you think. A year or so away, is that what you're thinking?
Well, I think by 2020 we'll be in the thick of it. And to us, we want to see things happen that are dramatic and fast. And what I say in my report is you can see things happening dramatically and fast. And it's just that in the immediacy, in this sort of immediacy feedback loop, it doesn't work that way. These are big forces, big timelines. The timeline, in my mind, started in 1776 with the steam engine. That's when we're in a new era, basically. And that's when we had all this cheap oil energy. We figured out how to use coal and oil.
Does this war go nuclear?
Well, isn't that interesting that in the first move of the chessboard that the U.S. would demonstrate a nuclear weapon? Wouldn't you reserve your nuclear weapon, the Queen, for the last move? Isn't that very interesting? And there's another thing, we think about India and Pakistan. Well, India has...
Wait, but do you think it goes nuclear?
Depends if people understand what nuclear weapons are. And I don't think they understood the ramifications during World War II. And I doubt they do now. And that's the danger, especially in Pakistan.
So you're not going to give me an answer.
Well, let's say that the country most likely to use a nuke is an Islamic country. It's Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia funded Pakistan. Pakistan developed nuclear weapons. And there's this thing called the line of control between India and Pakistan. And let's say, India has this thing called Cold Start. Cold Start's a blitzkrieg. Their idea was to disarm Pakistan's nuclear weapons with a blitzkrieg right over the border. And Pakistan just changed its stance to use nuclear weapons preemptively. Thank you, George W. Bush. One, for not disarming Pakistan, and one, for saying that it was credible to use nuclear weapons first.
That's right.
And again, to start where to sort of continue where we started, the nuclear missile test, submarine test off the shores of California. Wouldn't you reserve the unusable, I'm the destroyer of worlds. That's what Oppenheimer called it. I'm the destroyer of worlds. Wouldn't you use that as a last resort?
Well, it sounds to me that this next war is going to go nuclear. It sounds to me you think this next war is going to go nuclear at some point with somebody.
It's very, very possible, or it might be a Saudi bomb that is put onto, I said this on CNBC, and I was ass-launched from CNBC. I was on CNBC. I was ass-launched on CNBC. I'm publishing a book called Black Eyes, which talks about the survivability of high-frequency trading networks, computer networks, infrastructure, telecommunications. And I was on CNBC because I built a lot of the technology used now on high-frequency trading. And I'm on CNBC, and I said, the cheapest nuclear missile is a freighter that is just waltzing its way into Newark Harbor. And there's thousands of them. North Korea has thousands of delivery platforms.
Yeah.
Cheap submarines, cheap ships, commercial ships. And that was enough to ban me permanently, from CNBC. So,
well, that's the truth, though. I mean, what you're saying is that's the truth.
Well, that's what's the truth
is scary.
It's scary. The truth is in the first 40 pages of that document that I put together, and that we can't discuss because there's no time for it. But the truth is that the information that you get is a lot of times the information that you want.
Well,
for example, with Jade Helm, if you want,
I didn't cover that. I covered that with you, but I didn't cover that because I didn't know anything about it, and a lot of people were guessing about it.
Well, I had a conversation.
September 15th is going to happen, and then they'll be taking over the country, and I'm like, huh, what?
I had a conversation, in Stamford, Connecticut, which is the new Wall Street, with the head of high-frequency trading of one of the major investment banks, and I also had a discussion with a hedge fund startup that was arbitraging ETFs against stocks, and these guys were handling data in such a way that it has redefined the internet, and it's going to have just tremendous ramifications on your own personal survival. If you don't understand how this works,
yeah, you're talking about the internet really becoming a spy agency. The internet, not NSA, the internet.
Even more than that. It's even worse than
that. One last thing so if we have all this war and all this deflation and everything else, how does gold do? I know I have a lot of people on here that like gold. They think that they're capping the price of gold. That I think I don't know. The evidence out there is pretty strong. They manipulated LIBOR. They pled guilty to that. They manipulated the Forex markets. They pled guilty to that. The big banks. If they manipulated Forex, they're manipulating gold. How does gold do in this scenario?
Well, I wouldn't sell my gold, for anything, because it's going to survive through this crisis. It's going to survive through deflation. It's going to survive through hyperinflation. It's going to survive through war, assuming that you do. and it will be liquid one way or another. People recognize that it has some value, And in the presentation, I talk about which currencies are going to have value in the short term of the crisis, and we talked about that stack of $20 bills. Yeah. Which currencies have value long after the crisis is over? So in my travels in a communist country, sex workers, that's a currency. Laundry detergent, that could be a currency. Right. In the flood, here in New York, things that you depend upon, like technology, cell phones, the first to fail. Well, you want to use technologically based currency? Good luck to you.
Yeah.
A Bitcoin or even a bank record.
Yeah.
Good luck to you. But look, how after World War II did they figure out who owned land in Germany? How did they figure out who owned land in the bombed out, London?
You had deeds.
You had deeds. So maybe in the long term, some of the paper assets, are there. But then again, there's a tremendous amount of fragility in a system where everything is interconnected. So when
electronic interconnected Bitcoin, credit cards, hey, here's my Apple Pay, and that you talk about that stuff, which is very fragile, as opposed to a dollar, a silver coin, a gold coin on the one end of the spectrum.
So even a ledger, a ledger of who owns what piece of property in a parcel map in a town hall, the electronic stuff, it's incredibly fragile, and all our society is based on that fragile thing. And even now, all of the real assets, the infrastructure, the electricity lines, I know somebody that works with the electricity lines, and they're always worried about cyber terrorism. They're going to shut down the utilities. Well, guess what? The utilities use the 1970s protocol on these utility lines to communicate with. It's a network that's unhackable because no one knows the technology.
Well,
so you don't have to worry about that.
Your most recent paper is 140 pages long.
It's more like a newsletter than a presentation.
It's a newsletter. Let's call it a newsletter. I told the people, the only criticism, I only had about 4 or 5 people that said, well, it was bullet pointed and it really didn't explain. It was something that Warren could have stood up and given a bullet pointed presentation and filled in the blanks. And in this paper, you filled in the blanks. It's 140 pages. There's articles, there's pictures, there's drawings, schematic overlay. You pointed to stuff. A very interesting, very deep. Talks about Hadoop. I'll just let people do, which is basically turning the internet into the NSA, not the NSA doing it. The internet itself becoming a spy agency.
It's turning your computer and your cell phone into a spy, into one of the nodes spy.
And how to get out of it, you talk about that. There's just a lot more stuff in there about what countries will line up against war. We didn't bring up Europe because in your presentation you say you name many countries that are going to be a basket case, and if you
look at Portugal, that's an example. I didn't list that as a country that was unstable.
So
look at Portugal and look at France.
It's going to be a basket case, but I just wanted to tell people that the link to this thing is going to be on for you YouTube users. It's going to be on usawatchdog.com. Just go to the right through and say all links can be found at usawatchdog.com. You go to that page, you scroll down, you see after the interview Warren Pollock to get his to your latest newsletter, which is just $10. I mean, you've been working on this for 6 weeks or something.
Well, what I've been doing is trying to organize the information so that, when you're hit with a news article, most of them are fake and phony. So I try to discern which ones are real and important.
Another thing you bring up, false narratives.
Cross out what's wrong, put the right narrative in, and try to organize it so it's followable. But there's about 40 pages on total information control, how it's going to affect you, what you must need to do. Then we talk about Saudi Arabia, how that works. We talk about the U.S. dollar cockroaches. We talk about the war and all the things that we can't talk about. It would take us hours.
Right. Absolutely right. Warren Pollock, thank you for joining us today on usawatchdog.com. I love having you on. I mean, I met you because you were commenting on my site and realized you're a smart guy, and I just want to bring your brain out to the people. I don't mind linking to this on usawatchdog.com. Thank you very much, Warren Pollock, for joining us today on usawatchdog.com.
Great to be here, Craig.